A tonal shift the moment that power button clicks on. Thunderstorms, dark clouds. An ominous, foreboding feeling sinks in, pierced only by a harrowing pipe organ. It's practically a challenge, as if to say, you're not ready for this. This one isn't like the others.
And then, ready for it? Final Fantasy III. When you saw this fiery font emerging from your CRT TV, burning across the room to your flannel couch, and heard those epic chords ringing out across the wallpapered walls of your wood-furnished living room, littered with fruit roll-up wrappers and Sunday newspaper comics, you knew you were about to play a Super Nintendo game that was truly super and unlike anything that came before.
The unease breaks away thanks to familiarity, as the Crystal Prelude begins to play at the file select. This comfort is temporary, as starting a new game thrusts you back into a sense of darkness. Chimes punctuating major bits of story information laid before you. If your eyes and ears didn't convince you that this world will be different, it's told quite plainly.
Right away, you're told of an ancient war that reduced the world to a scorched wasteland, and magic simply ceased to exist. Now, machine energy is on the rise.
And in this relatively steampunk world, there are rumors that the rampant Empire's army has a young woman who can use magic. And that's a big deal.
Can it be that those in power are on the verge of repeating a senseless and deadly mistake? Now that's taking video game storytelling to a new level. Kinda goes above and beyond Go Rescue the Princess or some shit.
We are introduced to this miraculous person, Terra, as she accompanies a few Imperial soldiers to seek out a magical being known as an Esper. And Terra is robbed of her thoughts, mind-controlled, thanks to the Empire.
The soldiers are named Vix and Wedge, or Biggs and Wedge in the Japanese version, a Star Wars reference. They mention that before Terra was under their control, she had fried 50 of their soldiers in under 3 minutes. It already raises many questions and builds mystery. Are you enthralled yet? This is some good shit. The three march into the snow in their mech suits, known as Magitech armors, as we realize we just watched a pre-credits sequence to a video game. We watch them trek through the 3D Winter Wonderland with those Mode 7 graphics and that emotional cinematic score as we anticipate the adventure that awaits us. We are about to play the greatest video game of all time. That's right. We're doing this. And what better time? Because I think of this as a winter break type of game. I remember the time off from school. And also, there's something about the cold, downcast, melancholy state the game embodies. Also, with the holiday season, I thought I'd give myself a little bit of a gift. You know, because last time I played one of the worst, most fiery, hellish games of all time. But now, I play its winter polar opposite.
Final Fantasy VI was released in the West as Final Fantasy III. Don't worry, after this, the numbers start making sense.
I know. I've been calling it Final Fantasy III because I'm playing the Super Nintendo version, and that's what it's called. Of course, the Super Famicom version is called 6, which we all know is the true sequential number, but back then, I had no idea, and neither did anyone else I knew. Not until 7 came out on PlayStation, and I was like, what? How did we get to 7 already? Now, everyone knows the story. I even covered it way back in my Chronologically Confused episode. The mix-up has long been cleared. Everyone calls it 6 now. But the cartridge still says 3. The title screen still says 3. Every time I play it, it still says 3. I tried giving it the finger and telling it, fuck you, you're wrong. But the game still says 3. Fact.
This was developed in only 1 year after Final Fantasy V. That blows my mind. This is another one of those games where I had rented it first, especially after having played the other 2 Final Fantasy games available in the US, and I liked it so much that I rented it multiple times in a row.
When this game first came out, it was the most expensive game I ever bought with my own money. It was close to $80 when most Super Nintendo games were closer to $60. I distinctly remember walking into KB Toys at the mall with my saved up cash. I remember the clerk agreeing that it was overly pricey, but to be fair, he said this game takes like 5 to 8 months to beat, which back then was a big deal. The manual was almost like a whole D&D book, full of character stats and information. It even came with a double-sided map. Final Fantasy III was the biggest game of its time.
Now, when people talk about what the best Final Fantasy games ever are, this one frequently comes up. And there's a good reason why.
But with good games, sometimes there comes a different kind of trauma. Let me tell you a little story here. As you probably know, this is not a game you just pick up and play for 20 minutes before you hop on the school bus, or even a couple hours after you've done your homework. This is a game that you chip away at over several months. It's a work in progress, a hobby of sorts that you invest yourself in. This is a game you catch up on while you're sick. It was the longest, most all-consuming game of its era. It came out in '94, but sometime I'd say by the summer of '95, I had finally made it to the final area, Kefka's Tower. The finale was in sight. My heart was pounding, my pulse was racing. I was approaching the end of the most epic gaming experience of my life. All of a sudden, the game froze. Yeah, the screen broke up into glitchy colors. Through decades of foggy memory, I'd say it looked something like this. I had never seen anything like that happen before, nor have I ever seen anything like it since. The game restarted, or I had to reset, I can't remember which. The opening scene replayed, which shouldn't happen, so that was a bad omen. So nervously, I waited until I got to the first save point, and there, sure enough, all my save data was erased. True story. I was definitely an angry nerd that day, especially for a kid with no real-life responsibilities, no family to support, nothing like that. No, having your Final Fantasy game erased was a big fucking problem. And that was how my childhood experience with that game ended. And in almost 30 years since, I never again attempted to beat the game. I just could not bear to invest myself in it so deeply again. It's like losing a pet and then deciding to get another pet only to one day again face the inevitable. That was fucking sad, I'm sorry. But that theme of loss is commonly cited as being a big part of the game's storyline. And now that so much time has passed, maybe it's time to give it a shot again. Because I'm gonna do it. This is my second chance. I'm gonna complete my childhood.
Terra and her Imperial escorts, the first instance of Biggs and Wedge, ride into town on Magitech armor. And these machines do more than just look cool and show the mechanical, imposing power of the Empire. They provide a safe tutorial. It puts the player into battles that they can easily handle, and all the Magitech abilities make it very difficult for the player to lose. It shows how to take actions, how there are different elements, and if you're Terra, you have even more Magitech expertise, along with a few new battle formations that can happen, side attacks, and pincer attacks. The simple yet effective tutorial continues as you go into the first boss fight against the lightning snail creature, where first off, you hear the best song in the game. The soldiers talk about how the battles are real time, and you can wait out an enemy's actions to better plan your own. I'll go more into the battle system in a bit here. After meeting with the frozen Esper, it has some sort of reaction with Terra, causing the two soldiers to get wiped from existence and destroying her Magitech. When she awakens, she learns that she was being mind-controlled and that the soldiers of Narshe are trying to take her away. A kind man who works with a group opposed to the Empire helps her escape. She falls during her escape, but thankfully help is on the way, in the form of the treasure hunter, Locke, along with the best song in the game. Just as Locke is introduced, so is another character and another gameplay mechanic. Mog shows up with a team of Moogles to conveniently help Locke in the upcoming fight, and more importantly, give the player a total of 3 separate teams to control all at once. The enemies pursue Terra, and you can move each team into defensive positions or have them go on the offensive. Maybe it's simple now, but this was impressive for the time, and it also shows that there will be times that more than just your favorite 4 party members are going to be used.
This was the first RPG I ever played. My first glimpse of it was at a friend's house. I remember seeing the battle screen and wondering, why are the characters just slashing at the air? Why are there a bunch of numbers popping up? I wasn't used to this more automated, luck-based fight system. What is this, I thought? Some kind of flashy board game turned into a video game? I actually wasn't that far off, having already owned those role-playing board games like Hero Quest and Dragon Strike. I wasn't fully aware how far back its history went with D&D. I didn't know RPGs were a thing, but after Final Fantasy III on Super Nintendo, I sure as hell did.
A lot of previous known mechanics are back. Attacks, the front and back row system, multi-targeting with magic spells, and special abilities are back like Steel. With the lack of a job system, now special abilities are tied to individual characters, closer to how Final Fantasy IV had it. Only now, there's a much wider variety of options.
Cayenne has sword tech where you charge up and attack. Shadow throws weapons from your inventory and has his interceptor move. Mog has all the crazy dances. Edgar has tools like a drill and a chainsaw complete with a Jason Voorhees mask. I don't use his bioblaster that much, but I love how it looks. Strago has the lure ability to learn the enemy's spells. And because Setzer is a gambler, his moves are based on a slot machine outcome. Gao has rage where he uses the enemy's attacks. Sabin has the blitz moves, like I said. It can suck when you mess up the button command, but these moves are some of the most powerful in my experience.
Every single member has their own ability that makes them stand out, but which will be sort of a running theme throughout this critique. Not all of them are made equal. For example, Gao learns how to mimic enemy monsters in battle, which overlaps a lot with Strago's blue magic, only is more unreliable, and Realm's sketch ability also copies an enemy attack. And sure, Celeste can absorb magic with her runic ability, but when your party is also trying to cast magic, it quickly loses all utility early on and gets forgotten about. Another example would be Cyan's ability, his sword techniques, or Bushido, if you prefer updated names. He has multiple to choose from, and the way you do that is to let a bar slowly fill up until you get the one you want. Yeah, this is it, and there's no way to speed up or alter this bar. This is not engaging or interesting, it's just waiting. Compare this to someone like Sabin, whose blitz techniques are easily the best. He shoots energy beams, pummels dudes, has the ultimate bum rush attack, and of course, he can do this.
I mean, the dude can pick up an entire train. That's hardcore.
So while the job system itself is no longer here, the unique abilities essentially give each character a sort of job. Thief, monk, samurai, blue mage, etc. Some other well-known jobs also sort of make appearances thanks to this game giving everyone 2 relic slots, which are the accessory slots. These accessories can be the usual protective item or stat booster, and other ones give different abilities like the Dragoon's jump, the Paladin's cover, or even just making you move faster outside of battle. They provide for a little bit of extra customization and variety, but much like most other abilities in the game, they don't hold up very long and get quickly replaced. Sadly, much like almost everyone's unique ability.
Once you start acquiring the Espers, you can assign them to characters so they can learn certain spells as you go on. This all gives the player the freedom of customizing your characters however you see fit and trying out different combinations of abilities.
You can painstakingly use this to tweak your characters how you'd like, such as by increasing their magic power, speed, overall hit points, and so on. And much like how previously jobs got ability points to learn new skills, in-equipped Magicite teaches magic at different rates as they acquire ability points. What this means is that it's possible for every character to learn every spell in the game. Remember, this is a world in which magic no longer exists, and a major story point is your entire party suddenly getting it back. Because of this, magic is incredibly powerful in Final Fantasy VI, which further makes a lot of character abilities become worthless in the face of dropping, say, Ultima. Why use Setzer's unreliable slots when a magic spell is far more effective and powerful? This is one of Final Fantasy VI's shortcomings. The Esper system can give everyone magic, and magic is the best thing to use, causing a homogenization of all the unique characters midway through the game. Eventually, they're all throwing out spells with maybe a handful of physical characters left, none of which have worthwhile abilities anymore, and they all start to be the same. It's not the best system in the world. It's unrefined, exploitable, a bit on the grindy side to learn the magic, and saps away the uniqueness of almost every character in the game.
The random encounters on the overworld screen can get a little annoying, and the leveling up and grinding can sometimes feel monotonous, even though the combat screens are so strangely addicting. Leveling up to max can not only take an insane amount of time, but can also make the game too easy. One of the things I hate is whenever there's a boss or enemy that has a fatal attack that nukes your entire party. So you have to time it with a life 3 spell or anything to revive at least one member or something to avoid it. This doesn't feel like strategy. It feels almost like a cheat. When the game is unfair, you gotta be unfair.
That said, the battle system itself, it's still fun, quick, beautifully presented, and getting those new spells or carefully selected level up bonuses is great. The combat system itself is good, and it feels snappy and polished. Outside of that, it isn't perfect. And besides, the game's buggy as shit. I know each installment had its issues before this one, but man, it really seems like the problems are much more prevalent here. Stuff like evasion not working at all, making the darkness ailment have no effect whatsoever, and ignoring it is the best way to deal with it. There's also an exploitable bug in which you can cast invisibility on enemies, which makes them 100% susceptible to magic, including instant kill spells such as X-Zone and Death. This even works against bosses and completely trivializes them once you realize this works. There's a bug you can use with Gao, making him ferociously powerful. The same goes for Cyan. You can dupe items using Realm's sketch ability. There's a lot.
Also, when you're in a town, sometimes people can get in your way. Come on! Come on! Move your ass! Come on, dude. Come on, get out of my way, you fuck! Ah! Oh, no, come on. Out of my way. Walking in general can feel a little clumsy. You can't go diagonal. Squaresoft later corrected this with Chrono Trigger. Man, now that's a fucking good game too. Maybe that's the other greatest game of all time. The movement is much smoother. I also like how you can see all the characters following you. But in Final Fantasy, they all sort of combine into one character. I never understood that. You know, one time I was working at a convenience store and this guy came in and then he split up like his body divided into 4 people. Yeah, turned out he was with his family. It is cool that the game shows you how much time you've put in, although I don't know how accurate that is because it's possible to leave the game on while you're not playing. Also, why does it tell you how many steps you've taken? Are the characters wearing an early version of a step tracker for fitness? I am aware that sometimes it's possible to get soft locked. Yeah, it's rare, but say for example one character dies and the other one in the party has pause casted on him, situations like that can really suck because now you lost a whole lot of progress.
While most of them don't typically affect your casual playthrough, it's worth noting how buggy the game's original release is. This isn't totally detrimental to the quality of the game, as the good heavily outweighs my nitpicks. I was pleasantly surprised to see that some of the bosses were more intricate than I remember. A few have mechanics that you must learn and play around, instead of just dishing out damage. They aren't as difficult or involved as, say, Final Fantasy V's, but almost all of them require more than just whittling down hit point sponges.
There's some amazing psychedelic graphics here. It does things you wouldn't even imagine were possible on the Super Nintendo. I remember when I first saw this stuff, I was like, what the hell? It seemed like my TV screen was melting. Then there's the more comedic Esper spells like Cat Rain. Yeah, just a cartoon cat that comes by. The design of the enemies is a work of art in itself. They differ from the tiny pixelated hero characters since they're so detailed and can be very large. Take a look at Atma. Is that thing intimidating or what? How about Chupan, Poltergeist, Behemoth, Doom, or Hades Gygus Colossus? That's metal as fuck. Final word on the graphics? With all the spells and enemies, it's a marvel to look at. It's some of the best stuff to come out of the SNES.
There are 14 total characters in Final Fantasy VI, each having something unique about them. Mechanically alone, this demonstrates what is easily Final Fantasy VI's strongest aspect: character. Every single one is more than their abilities or combat prowess. Almost all of them have an arc, get developed to be believable, relatable, someone to sympathize with. It is leagues beyond the melodramatic simplicity of Final Fantasy IV, or the barely there establishment of V's characters. It is imperative to have good characters, because that's what makes any story stand out. If you don't care about what happens to the people in the story becomes inconsequential and unsubstantial. Final Fantasy VI was the first one in the series to dare to make real, developed characters that aren't one note. The first to make a story that could have an emotional effect on the player. The first to, in a sense, take itself seriously.
The characters are really the core element of why this game was so groundbreaking. Never had there been such an amazing ensemble, all with their own unique personalities and rich backstories. The camaraderie of these characters really shines through. It's all about building the team. It's Wizard of Oz. It's Lord of the Rings. Over the course of the adventure, you come to know them, almost like real people. And the fact they can achieve this with little pixelated sprites and minimal graphic technology is a major accomplishment. Passion always comes through in spite of limitations.
The developers went into great care to make sure that each character has a sense of individuality to them. The expanded special abilities for each is an example of this. It's also evident at the start of every battle. Each character has a unique intro animation in the first 2 seconds right as combat starts. Oftentimes, these animations showcase the personalities. Sabin shows up ready to fight. Locke comes from behind enemy lines as if he were scouting ahead or sneaking. Mog dances. This matches how each has a unique visual design, all boasting different silhouettes and, again, has significance. Sabin and Edgar are twin brothers and share the same color palette. Realm is Strago's granddaughter, and again they share the same colors. Terra, who is not quite of this world, stands out by having the unique trait of noticeably green hair, helping her seem a little more inhuman than everyone else. Fun fact, for the game's 25th anniversary, there was an interview with some of the developers on the original team. In that interview, they revealed that they created all of the character sprites first, and then famed artist Yoshitaka Amano made art based on the sprites, not the other way around. They even joked that if they made all their sprites based on Amano's artwork, all of them would be blonde. So, whenever you see Terra out there with blonde hair, just remember that's bullshit and inaccurate to her original depiction, green hair Terra for life. As much as I love the varied and interesting character designs, it's their stories that make me love this game as much as I do. So many of them have excellent, expansive backstories that explain why they are the way they are, and what motivates them to do what they do. Just important as their backstories, they all have front stories. It's that motivation that makes many scenes have additional layers of emotional and internal complexity.
There isn't even a clear main character. They all seem just as important.
It doesn't really have a main character. The game basically asks you, who do you want to be the main character?
If I had to pick one, I'd say Terra, whose father was an Esper, which is where her gifted magical abilities come from. Much of her story is about trying to find her identity and place in the world. Having fought on the Empire's side through mind control, she now tries to rectify that by fighting alongside the heroes. Celeste, or Celis, also used to be on the Empire's side and has been genetically powered through magic. She eventually turns against the Empire. Locke is a thief, or treasure hunter as he prefers, who's bitter after his girlfriend was killed by the Empire. He eventually has a romantic yet complicated relationship with Celeste. Edgar is the king of Figaro who pretends to be in alliance with the Empire, but is really on the good guy's side. And on top of that, his entire castle is set on fire. So he's also had his share of tragedy. He's a little bit sketchy though. What the fuck? Sabin is Edgar's brother who leaves the royal life to be free. He looks like Guile, and his blitz moves use similar button commands to Street Fighter. Cayenne is a samurai-type character. His town's water supply was poisoned by the main villain Kefka, killing almost everyone, including his wife and son. Shadow is a more mysterious type of character, a ninja assassin, an outlaw vigilante. He has his loyal dog by his side, and he always comes and goes unexpectedly. The best is when he swoops in to help during a key battle. Gao is sort of a Tarzan-type character, living in the wild, raised by animals. Maybe that's why he scoots on the ground. Ugh, like when your pet leaves those shit comets. There's also Setzer, the Han Solo-like gambler with the fastest airship, which happens to be called the Falcon. There's the little kid Realm and her surrogate grandfather Strago. There's Golgo with the power of Mimic. And Umaro, the brute Yeti, who's so physical, he actually throws the other characters. Look at that. And my favorite is Mog. What's his deal? Well, he's a Moogle. I don't know. I just love this guy. So fucking cute. So with all these characters, it really shows how far games had come by that point. Long gone were the days when it was just pick the guy or pick the girl. Now it was so much more than that.
Take Locke, for example, who is easily my favorite Final Fantasy character of all time. He always comes off as eagerly protective of other people. When he finds Terra, a young girl in distress, he protects her and then carries her out to safety. When he later finds Celeste, he makes it a point to rescue her as well, despite Celeste being a former Imperial general. Later, you learn of Locke's burden. He's felt responsible for an accident causing the love of his life, Rachel, to get hurt and lost her memory, only for her to die during a raid by the Empire. He couldn't save Rachel, so imagine the guilt he has as he carries an unconscious Terra to safety, and even more so after discovering that Terra has had all of her thought and memory taken from her. And again when he sees Celeste chained up and beaten while bearing a very clear resemblance to Rachel. Another strong example is Shadow, the mysterious assassin mercenary. As you discover his past, look back upon his reactions and little signals as he is around Realm. There are so many little movements that show how he truly feels and his struggle with that part of himself.
And those are just the playable characters. We can't forget Kefka. Kefka is possibly the greatest video game villain ever conceived. He suffered from an experimental magic infusion by the Empire, which made him go insane. After rising to power, he's become a psychotic tyrant who is hell-bent on senseless destruction. He backs it up with cynical, pessimistic ideology, making statements like, "There's no point of clinging to life when everyone must eventually die." The dude is messed up. Kefka has caused so much turmoil and given all the characters their own individual reasons to consider him a mortal enemy. Despite ripping the world apart, he brings these characters together with a common goal.
What makes him such a good bad guy is that he's a constant force throughout the game. He is introduced very early on and interacts with the heroes. His bombastic and over-the-top personality, complete with awfully amazing quotes, paints a perfect picture of how unstable he truly is. Because he appears as a foe multiple times, he's established as not just something you have to defeat, but want to, especially as he seems to always get away. It's that consistent reinforcement of his evil that is shown to the player firsthand. As the heroes experience it, as does the player. The burning of Castle Figaro, the poisoning of innocent lives in Castle Doma, the slaughter of dozens of Espers, and General Leo and Thamaza. His evil is shown, not told. And yet throughout the narrative, it's made constantly clear that Kefka is a henchman. He plays second fiddle to the leader of the evil empire, Emperor Gastal. If Kefka is this bad, then how much worse can Gastal be? The game offers an answer for you. He isn't.
So the game is very heavy on characters and story, and that usually is the most discussed aspect of the game.
Only a couple of hours into the game, in which paths diverge and split. Rather than guiding you through them or bouncing around, you are asked to choose which scenario you wish to play. You can play them in any order. Shortly after, you are asked to track down Terra in the town of Zozo, which, by the way, has the best song of the game. Before you go, something all new to Final Fantasy is introduced. Select your party of anyone you want. Who do you want to be a leader? Who goes along? Who do they have closer friendships with than others? This is further cemented as several dialogue lines do not have a name before them indicating who is speaking. Instead, you'll see whatever party members you've chosen make movements or nod before the line, making it so that the line is said by who you've chosen. Basically, the game asks you, who do you want saying this line? As you read the lines in your head, you are allowed to hear them in whomever's voice you wish. There are moments where you are rewarded for having certain characters with you in certain scenes by adding in an extra line of dialogue or an additional interaction or two. Typically, it isn't anything vital, but it usually provides a bit more development and does encourage changing things up or by replaying with a different party, even though I pretty much use Locke in every instance I can get. The same goes for learning any character's backstory. How much do you want to learn about them? Almost each of theirs is entirely optional. The more you use them and bring them to different locations, the more they'll speak, the more they interact, and the more they reveal about themselves and their personalities. The story itself is excellent and has some incredible moments. While its pacing is some of the best the series has, almost never wasting your time and moving things forward at an engaging rate, it does have a few stumbles. For example, while the 3-scenario split is great and awesome to see it for the first time, they are not equal. Sabin's scenario is about 5 times as long as Edgar and Tara's. Another time the plot felt sluggish is when the party has to go to Thamaza, as it introduces 2 more party members relatively late in the story, and felt a lot like a lot of integral world building and setup quickly jammed in before the climax of the 3rd act. Almost as if they forgot to fit the existence of the god statues in somewhere else and had to force it onto the player. These are the only couple of blemishes I could think of on an otherwise expertly paced story. However, what makes Final Fantasy VI so incredibly good and memorable is the way they tell the story. For really the first time in the series, it allows time and space for the characters, allowing them to speak to each other, express their emotions, their concerns. It's okay to have scenes that allow character moments and not drive the plot forward. One of the finest examples of this is also perhaps one of the most beloved scenes in the whole game. As the party searches for a means to access the southern continent and go after the Empire directly, they concoct a plan to enlist the owner of the world's only airship, Setzer. This involves having Celeste pose as a famous opera singer to get its attention. The opera sequence is, simply put, beautiful. It's more than its presentation, though a full-fledged opera and several movements telling a story within a story is a strong part of it. Something like this simply was not feasible before. It's a delight for both eyes and ears, and to those willing to look deeper, an important piece of storytelling. There is an argument that the opera scene is pointless, as it halts the entire game just to have this one sequence before getting the next party member, and to some, that is reasonable. I contest that, however, because the whole opera makes a very clear and appreciated statement. It is okay to have scenes that don't further the plot as it develops character. A key mantra to make most RPGs more enjoyable is to give weight behind what people are saying. If you simply read the words rather than absorb and interpret them, you may find it to be lackluster. Final Fantasy VI is the first in the series to reward players that read between the lines. The opera scene makes this clear. At base level, it's cute. The music is catchy, the vignettes endearing, and a fair distraction from the menace of the world. Look deeper, and you see the layers of complexity it adds to its rich tapestry of characters. Celeste, who was once a battle-hardened general of the evil empire, now turned traitor and abetting the Allies, begrudgingly volunteers to be the main star. Again, on the surface, it's a silly scenario and puts the characters in a humorous situation, when in reality, it takes that cold, hardened exterior of Celeste and shows just how soft, how vulnerable she really is. Just before her debut, Locke enters the dressing room to check on Celeste. Stunned by her transformation into a stage star, Locke begins to see Celeste in a new light, something that had not gone unnoticed by her. Having only ever been a general, and, as she had told Edgar before, not some love-starved twit, the possibility of someone caring for her and not her capabilities was a foreign feeling. It was something she even doubted, as she questions Locke about it, as if she were calling him out not only in trying to beget his own guilt, and calling herself out for thinking someone could care for her. Then, Celeste takes the stage. The words she sings of the opera are not coincidentally reflective of her own feelings and internal conflicts, the confusion she feels of if Locke even truly cares for her at all. Love goes away, like night into day. It's just a fading dream. Her loneliness finally allowed the possibility of someone else's care and affection. I'm the darkness, you're the stars. Celeste believes that Locke was only using her to try to replace Rachel, feeling perhaps this was a mistake. Must I forget you? Our solemn promise. Will autumn take the place of spring? Masked within the lyrics, she admits her own feelings to herself and to Locke in the audience, unbeknownst to him. My heart won't give you up. Ere I walk away, let me hear you say, I meant as much to you. So gently you touched my heart. I will be forever yours. Come what may, I won't age a day. I'll wait for you, always. The opera scene is powerful and heart-touching, deservedly known as the most memorable scene in the game. It's the words and emotions of moments such as this that propels Final Fantasy VI into reverence. And shortly after, a giant octopus named Ultros attacks to ruin the opera, so it's also not afraid of some levity here and there. Again, it's these character-building scenes that makes this story so strong. Letting the characters have conversations that isn't about the Empire or saving the world or whatever creates characters to care about and empathize with. Inside the Returner hideout, the walk to the mountains of Narshi, the boat ride to Thamaza. All of these otherwise inconsequential scenes build good characters.
But let's talk about one of the game's most pivotal chapters of all. It happens after Kefka opens the gate to the Esper world, which causes a major geological event where the entire island becomes the floating continent. The group drops from the airship onto the island and proceeds to embark on a massive dungeon-like sequence, navigating through an elaborate and unstable maze of crumbling areas and teleportation holes and fighting all kinds of difficult monsters. The fact that I have to gloss over this part of the experience says so much about the importance of what happens next. At this point in the game, you've played for so long, you would be more than satisfied if this were the final confrontation. Doesn't it seem like it? If this were an Indiana Jones movie, this is where the villain would be destroyed by their own recklessness. It has all the formula of a classic confrontation that would be followed by a final peaceful resolution, but no.
The party arrives to stop Gestalt from using the statues. This gives opportunity for Kefka to reveal how evil and beyond help he truly is. Kefka betrays and kills Gestalt. And then the unthinkable happens. You lose. You don't stop him. The good guys fail. Kefka is the rare example in which the villain wins. He got exactly what his twisted mind wanted. Destruction and despair. His rise as a joke of an errand boy, a jester, to a misanthropic nutjob, to the absolute merciless ruling power in the whole world is his story arc. How he changes from the beginning to the end, all while laughing the whole way, burned into your memory forever.
You race a timer to leave the continent, and when you reach the edge to leap back onto the airship, you're given the option to wait for Shadow, or else you permanently lose him. As if you're not already shitting your pants, this guy makes you run the timer down to almost the last possible fucking second. After this, we witness a global catastrophe unlike anything before in a game. The ground rips apart, people fall into earthquakes, the airship is torn in half, everyone is scattered and lost, and then we're met with a black screen with a simple line that resonates so much. On that day, the world was changed forever. Imagine playing this as a kid, back in the day, before the internet as we know existed, and we didn't know what was going to happen next. I mean, this could be the ending, it could just be one big miserable downer, or we could be nowhere near the end,
This new world of Ruin poses a new open-world approach to RPGs. Everyone is gone. Only 3 characters, Celeste, Edgar, and Setzer, are required to beat the game. Everyone else is optional, and for all you know, dead forever. From here, you are able to search freely throughout the new landscape, choosing any locale or direction to begin your search for friends. Remember, who do you want to be the main character? Go find them. The World of Ruin also enforces what I believe to be the central theme of Final Fantasy VI. The whole game is about loss. How does a character respond to loss? Almost every character's backstory is about losing something, and the end of the world is them continuing to deal with loss. Most importantly, there is some form of loss and response to it that everyone can identify with in some way. When the world ended, Locke went back to trying to revive Rachel and abolish his feelings of guilt. Edgar kept trying to find solutions instead of allowing himself to emotionally process it. Gao said he must become stronger and didn't give up. Strago's will broke, succumbing to the cult of Kefka. Terra chose to be there for now orphaned children. Cyan began living a lie, pretending to be someone else.
Celeste awakens on a small deserted island being cared for by Sid, who's like a parental figure and has a lot of history with the Final Fantasy series. Anyway, after she gains consciousness, Sid succumbs to his own sickness, and you need to care for him by catching and feeding him fish. He can either live or die, which doesn't change a whole lot with the outcome of the game, but if he dies, you witness the most depressing scene of any game I've ever played. Celeste goes to the top of a cliff, reminisces about Locke and how everyone's gone, and with nothing left in her life, she tries to end it all.
I've been there. That feeling of overwhelming loss and pain and heartbreak and just wanting it to all end.
Looking back, this is the darkest and most shocking thing I've ever seen in a game that was played by kids. But Celeste survives, finds out Locke is still alive, takes a raft, and embarks on a new quest. By going in such a dark place, the game is able to make a point that no matter how bleak things seem, there's always hope.
Final Fantasy VI takes this theme of loss and asks, which one of these responses are you? Even Kefka represents a response to loss, perhaps the most dismal of them all. Nihilism. Nothing matters. Why bother building? Why bother doing anything? Why have friends or loved ones? To Kefka, he's doing everyone a favor because they can't see what he believes to be the ultimate truth. Destruction is inevitable, and they can't accept that.
When you think about it, this is why Kefka is such a relevant antagonist, because he thinks life is meaningless. He uses his own trauma to spread despair and bring down all the others. He tries to make all the other characters give up. Do you want to give up after how far you've come? Hell no! Even though you've lost everything and now have to find where your friends have gone, collect all new items, and explore the transformed landscape, which is now called the World of Ruin. As you go on, all that talk of the previous world and how things used to be makes so much more sense as an adult. As a kid, how are you supposed to reminisce on the good old days? You have to grow up and experience life first. So for that reason, what I'm trying to say here is that not only does this game hold up today, it's actually better as an adult.
Honestly, I could spend forever doing an in-depth character analysis on everyone, but then we would be here forever. I could only really do this on Final Fantasy VI in particular, as it's the one that I know inside and out the best. Which is also why I can safely say that for as strong as the game's characters are, it can also be its weakest, as they are not all made equal. It's clear some characters just get more or better backstory and writing than others. Locke and Celeste get a ton, whereas people like Ralm and Strago are practically accessories to Shadow's story and don't grow at all. Shadow does get quite a bit, as does Cyan, but Mog, Gogo, Umaro, or Gao don't get a whole lot. Even as a more prominent character throughout the whole game, Edgar doesn't develop compared to most of the others. For every couple of outstanding characters and stories, there's one painfully lackluster example. This imbalance doesn't have much of an excuse, as there's plenty of time and room to explore any of them further. Good lord, I haven't even talked about the music yet. I already mentioned the best song in the game, but there's so much more.
The sound effects are amazing, and the music by Nobuo Uematsu sounds like it could have been the score for a major film. There's been lots of great video game soundtracks up till this point, but this took it to a whole new level.
But this soundtrack tries to break out of a familiar sound like the previous games on the SNES, especially with it having a more industrial setting mixed with fantasy. The Veldt has such a unique wildlife sound by its excellent use of percussion. Some areas have unique music that only plays there. For example, the Magitech Research Facility is the best song in the game. But truly, Final Fantasy VI furthered its commitment to character by giving each and every character their own unique, memorable theme that plays for them throughout the game. These leitmotifs show up in numerous ways, such as taking a character's theme song and using the same melody in a melancholic version, especially during emotional or difficult times. The brothers Figaro have a majestic, powerful, and royal song. It's the best song in the game. But when they flash back to the passing of their father and their splitting paths, the same theme takes on an all-new feel. Locke's theme, which is the best in the game, is upbeat and represents his adventurous self. But when the subject of Rachel comes up, the same motif is filled with sorrow. Setzer's theme boasts freedom, as if the music itself is putting the wind in your hair. And when he finally opens up about his personal loss, it too uses the same melody to express him. Interestingly, Celeste's theme is the same melody as the opera. However, when the music plays for her during her times of duress, it's her main theme that's filled with sadness. Those few times her actual theme plays is more indicative of her character than most realize. Terra's theme and motif are the strongest throughout, as it not only plays during scenes about her, but also the overworld, which is the best song in the game. And the motif makes brief reprises in other songs as well. Even the Empire itself has its own theme, with its motif making multiple appearances. And of course, Kefka has an equally memorable theme song, one that is both comical and sinister. And it's this theme that serves as a basis for the final battle track and the best song in the game, Dancing Mad.
So once you've gained back all your characters, leveled them up enough, learned enough spells, and build up all your resources, you can make the call and go to Kefka's Tower.
The multiple party split mechanic of a few previous battles is now used for an entire dungeon. Up to 14 playable characters? You'll be able to use 12 of them at once.
The choices you make are crucial because each group is going to be taking an entirely different path. You're going to have to survive through many battles, so unless you spend enough time grinding, you might end up with one party that's way weaker than the others. So hopefully you have their powers spread out wisely. Let me ask a question. Have you ever walked into a bathroom to fight a monster? Yeah, he's right near a toilet. That's a real shitty battle. Kefka's Tower is an endurance. You'll be begging for a fucking save spot and have many close calls. The three parties reach the final area and regroup as one full ensemble for what can only be the climax. I've done it. I've made it to the final battle.
Right before the final showdown with Kefka, each character offers a development to their arcs, showing how they've changed from when their journey started.
Kefka gives a cynical speech about the meaningless of life, while the heroes counter, telling of what they've learned through the course of their adventure and the things they hold dear to them. Friendship, family, love, freedom, all their stories have come together in a satisfying way. And then Kefka calls for the greatest power of the universe. Standing on top of fiery peak, he says he'll create a monument to non-existence. This is when you start to wonder why this wasn't written as a stage play or feature film. Next, you determine the order your characters fight in, and then it's on. Holy shit! It's Satan! What else could it be? And if this wasn't enough, after he's defeated, the screen quakes and scrolls upward as you must face a whole tree of bosses. It's like bosses growing upon bosses upon bosses. Motherfuck! Oh my God! What is this all supposed to be anyway? It's like you're fighting Renaissance art. It's as if Michelangelo's The Last Judgment came to life and tried to kill you. And the haunting choir and organ music gives it an epic biblical effect. Some have even said the three tiers of bosses represent hell, purgatory, and heaven. Dude, if you have to fight hell, purgatory, and heaven, you better just call it a day. Yeah, and we're not even at Kefka. Oh my God! This is not Kefka as you'd expect. After becoming so familiar with that clowny little sprite, now he becomes a wicked angel floating against a golden cloudy sky blasting with heavenly light beams. They went above and beyond to make this the most epic final boss in gaming history. And I can't stress enough that if you're not leveled up properly and have enough Life 3 spells, you're just gonna get wiped out in one hit. Ah! I'm gonna do it! I'm gonna do it! I'm gonna do it! I'm gonna do it! I did it! I did it! After almost 30 years, I finally beat Final Fantasy 3 or 6. When you first hear that deafening crackle and see Kefka wither away into ashes, it's a feeling like no other. You just beat the greatest game of all time. And then you get a cinematic ending that goes on for over 20 minutes. Just sit back and enjoy, because for everything you went through, they knew when they made this game that you fucking deserve it.
The ending, too, makes it a point to be about the characters over spectacle or what happens next. Everyone gets a moment in the spotlight, complete with new arrangements of each of their theme songs, and an object important to each of them. I also love how they use this opportunity to hint at character relationships. For example, Realm's section and theme song leads directly into Shadows. Celeste's theme begins, sounding more hopeful than ever before, only for Locks to join it in harmony, as if to show that the characters themselves are coming together. It's beautiful. I love this kind of implicit storytelling throughout the whole game, rather than stating things outright in clunky exposition. From beginning to end, Final Fantasy VI spends its time highlighting the cast and what happens to them.
Another bucket list item checked off. It was worth going back and reclaiming that magic. I feel nostalgia is at its most powerful this time of year. The magic of the holidays harkens back to a more innocent time. The game itself is about characters who are literally trying to reclaim magic from a bygone era. And I can say the magic inside this cartridge is still strong.
I haven't played this in well over a decade, and having done so again, Final Fantasy VI is still my absolute favorite in the whole series.
On the top tier of the good-ass scale, there's a few levels. Games that are good like Robin Hood, dope as a kaleidoscope, and fuck me through the fucking ceiling!
I absolutely recommend playing through this one today. If you can. It's not the most accessible Final Fantasy game in the world. I played the Super Nintendo original and still love it, flaws and all. There was a mobile version that ported to Steam, just like Final Fantasy V. I personally can't stand the user interface and controls, and I think the art is ugly with everyone's puffed out chests and clashing environment textures. If that doesn't bother you, all the power to you, and play it. I don't recommend it though. Its first port was to the PlayStation 1. It has a few upgrades. It fixes a lot of bugs, adds in a bestiary, and 2 FMV cutscenes at the start and the end as an unlockable. It isn't the best port though. It has notorious load times going into battle or even opening up the menu, and the frame rate really suffers at times. Plus, the FMV sequences are so underwhelming, you're better off just looking at them on YouTube. In 2006, it got ported to the Game Boy Advance. This version boasts quite a bit. Bug fixes, an all-new translation, and even more added content. New spells, new espers to find, and 2 new dungeons. The downsides to it are it doesn't look or sound quite as good as the SNES original. The color palette is brighter and the lack of contrast makes sprites lose definition. The GBA can't put out the same quality of sound as the SNES, so music, and especially sound effects, are rougher. That said, you can emulate it with a few patches to make it better. There's a patch to make the graphics closer to the original, and the true sound patch helps the music. It isn't perfect and is still noticeably lackluster compared to the source though. I also just don't like the text font. Even with the patches, I don't prefer the GBA version, primarily because of the new translation. While some things are better, like item names or spells and descriptions, the script, I feel, suffers. The GBA version loses all of the subtlety and nuance that the SNES localization had. And in some parts, the new dialogue is abrasive or even cornier. So I highly recommend you play the Super Nintendo version. And perhaps the best option is to emulate it with a patch known as the Ted Woolsey Uncensored patch. It retains the localization of the original, while cleaning up some typos and overly censored mentions of heavier subjects such as death and certain sprites. You'll have the beautiful music, visuals, and gameplay of the original, but with an improved translation that stays truthful to the original. The Final Fantasy series has been loved up through this one. It was Final Fantasy VI's commitment to deeper, more mature themes and a fantastic cast that made it go from a great series to a special one.
This was the first gaming masterpiece of its kind. And there's only room in life for so many games to make such a lasting impression on you when you're a kid. And for me, this is it. This is one of those. And now I feel a sense of closure that I finally completed it, having taken, almost 30 years.
Final Fantasy VI will always have a special place in my heart. This was the first game to make me feel. And for that, I will always appreciate and cherish it, flaws and all. And with that, the Final Fantasy series leaves the Super Nintendo era. I hope that works out for them.
But now that's finally done, guess what? There's 16 of them!